We're walking through this series of videos right now on top challenges, big challenges dads have told us they have over the last several years through surveys and content. The last two videos we talked about time from two different angles because those are the couple we hear a lot. But the third one that we hear is that they struggle with communication. Most dads that we talk to say things like, I feel like I can't connect with my children and communicate with them. Or every time we talk, it turns into a fight. Here's how a few dads put it. One dad said, I really struggle being able to communicate with my sons and have meaningful conversations. One dad said, I really have a problem connecting with my kids and relating to their world. One dad said, my struggle is effective communication in a world of texts, tweets, and Snapchats. I love the way he put that. Dad, no question that God wants us to be men who communicate. That may not mean you're very wordy. You don't necessarily have to be an extrovert, but we are to communicate. In fact, you look through some of the Old Testament references and it said, I'll tell the next generation of God's wondrous works, right? So we can't just be the strong, silent type and pretend that that's going to get the job done. What that's going to yield is disconnection, and it's going to yield a distance between us and our children. So we've got to find ways to communicate in ways that are healthy. One way we can do that, I love how Colossians 4:6 puts it. It says, let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Think about that for a moment. Have you ever had really bland food? Have you ever had a meal where you're eating it and you're thinking, man, this just needs something. And then you grab the salt shaker and you put a little salt on it and you eat the same meal you were eating 10 seconds ago, and all of a sudden it tastes much better. Why is that? Salt is a great seasoning for all kinds of food, right? Well, what does God say in Colossians 4:6 through the Apostle Paul is the seasoning? Grace. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. One of the principles of communicating effectively is that communicators are not necessarily great speakers. I want to pause for a second because you may be wanting to argue with me about this. I'll let your brain argue with me for a moment. One of the deep, rich principles about communication is that the best communicators aren't always the best speakers. What the best communicators are the best listeners. They're the best listeners. I used to teach and still love to teach the art of speaking in a room, of public speaking. And one of the questions I always ask is, why do we need eye contact with the audience? Why do we need eye contact with the audience? And people will say, so we can, they can hear what we're saying and so we can get our point across. Wrong. That's like 20% true. The 80% truth is so that we get feedback from the audience, right? That's one of the things I don't love about doing videos is because I can't see you. You can see me, but I can't see you. And so I don't know if you're buying what I'm selling. I don't know if you're catching my point because I'm missing the eye contact. And let me wrap all this together in communication with our kids. Our conversation needs to be full of grace. Here's where we get this wrong as dads. We think communicating is talking. And often our conversations are full of judgment. They are full of criticism. They are full of rules, and they are full of do's and do nots, instead of being full of grace, right? So you may say to yourself, man, I'm really struggling to communicate with my children. Here's my question. Is your conversation full of grace? Are you using these principles where you're listening, where you're receiving? You're receiving. Proverbs 20 verse 5 says it this way, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Are you listening and pulling out of the heart of your children their passions, their desires, their struggles? When my kids bring me a problem, this is like communication tip for you. When my kids bring me a problem, hey dad, blah, 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 is there a problem? I almost always start with, what do you think? What do you think? Not because I have no ideas or no answers or no help, but because I want to know where they're starting from, right? I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. Corey and I had to drive miles to find a place to shoot today. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. And if I wanted to go to New York, I know I've got to go northeast. But the only reason I know that is because I know where I am. I know where I am. So I know how to get to where I'm going. Often, the reason we're struggling with communicating with our children is because instead of listening to them and understanding where they are, we just want them to understand where we are. You know, have you ever said to your kids, hey, listen to me? I've said that thousands of times. And it's not necessarily that I will never say that again, but to communicate, I must be a listener. Let me say it this way, Proverbs 18:13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. Dad, we need to speak with grace. We need to speak with grace. We need to lead with questions. Lead with questions. Proverbs 25. And we need to listen with empathy. Proverbs 18:13. Can we hear well? Can we start by listening? And these things will tie together a package of communicating well with our children. So as they age, they want to communicate with us, which leads me right to this week's mission. So this week's mission, Dad, listen well. That's it. That's it. Is there a topic that you can bring up with your family? Maybe it's at dinner, maybe it's even over a text exchange with your kids who are no longer in your home. Is there a topic you can bring up where your only objective is to listen well? Not to correct, not to fix, not even necessarily to give your opinion right that moment, but just to listen well. Can you pull out something from your children this week? Because that is the heart of being a good communicator. So if you've struggled with communicating, instead of trying to speak better, it's a good idea. Colossians 4:6 did talk about speaking and be seasoned with grace, but let's take some time this week to listen well. That's your only assignment for this week. I pray you'll take it and do it because you're not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose.